We have some breaking news this hour. Jack Smith, the special counsel, has new filing in the Mar-a-Lago documents case. In it, special counsel Smith asks the federal judge overseeing this case, that's Judge Aileen Cannon, to bar former President Trump from making statements that endanger law enforcement. This filing is in response to Trump this week complaining that standard boilerplate language contained in the FBI search warrant, which was used to search Mar-a-Lago in the summer of 2022. Trump is complaining that it was actually a secret attempt by Joe Biden to use the FBI to kill Donald Trump. This is an excerpt from that filing tonight on the part of Smith. Quote, Trump's repeated mischaracterization of these facts in widely distributed messages as an attempt to kill him, his family, and Secret Service agents has endangered law enforcement officers. Trump's conditions of release should therefore be modified to prohibit similar communications going forward. Back with me now are Susan Glasser, Brendan Buck, and Julian Castro. Susan, I go to you first on this just because this is a song we've heard before. Trump saying wild, implausible, and dangerous things that then put people in harm's way. However, the judge in this case, thus far, Aileen Cannon, has been very sympathetic to Donald Trump and has not been in much of a position to rule in favor of the special counsel. Do you have thoughts on this? Do you have a reaction to this?
Well, it's really notable that the special counsel has actually taken this to court. This was one of the wilder subplots of the week. Donald Trump embracing a new conspiracy theory, first promoted by some of his far-right allies like Marjorie Taylor Greene, basically distorting this, the raid at Mar-a-Lago, into some sort of an effort to put him in the crosshairs of federal law enforcement's guns. It even prompted a very unusual statement from Merrick Garland himself, the attorney general, saying that this wasn't true. Donald Trump, nonetheless, not only promoting it on his Truth Social media platform, but even raising money off of it. If you get those emails in your inbox, it says, Joe Biden tried to kill me. Literally. And it's a good example where Trump is used to never having any accountability for the wild, false allegations that he is used to spreading. And so, we'll see. I think you rightly pointed out the judge here has been quite sympathetic to Donald Trump and has effectively, in her rulings, made it impossible for this case to go to court before the election. So the American people won't have the benefit of knowing whether Trump will be found guilty of a very serious set of charges that involve him illegally taking scores of very classified, top secret documents from the White House with him and misusing or certainly keeping that information unsafe in his bathroom, in his bedroom. It's really a remarkable case all around, but I don't know if she'll sanction him or not.
Well, and as the hush money trial proves, Brendan, even if Trump stops saying it, that doesn't mean other people in the Republican Party will. And I have to say, looking at this week, the narrative that Joe Biden tried to assassinate Donald Trump feels like one of those weeds that left untended in the garden spreads everywhere. I mean, you already have Steve Bannon saying it. You have the far-right MAGA caucus in the Republican conference bandying this about. I do wonder, not on this network, not in, traditional mainstream media, not on Earth One, but in other parts of the internet and right-wing echo chambers, whether this thing has legs.
Yeah, that was actually my first reaction. I don't know what the judge is going to do in the case, but it reminds me how scary politics can be right now. If you take at face value what he is saying, he's putting in danger the lives of law enforcement. To me, that says that there are a bunch of people in the FBI who are probably being sort of tracked down on the internet and being threatened by crazy people who are hearing crazy stuff on the internet. And that is sort of the reality that we don't hear a lot about in politics today, but it affects, elected officials. It affects all kinds of places. We saw it down in Georgia, the woman who was pestered based on what Rudy Giuliani said. This is a scary place, and the way that information flows around can be really disturbing. And I imagine this is I expect this is probably something from a very practical or something that actually took place that triggered it, and that's scary.
Secretary Castro, it's also the way Trump demands fealty from all those who serve him, right? The notion that, it's similar to the 2020 big lie, right? Once he has a theory, once he has a theory in his mind, he's like a dog with a bone, and he won't let go of it, and he won't let anyone around him let go of it, which is why the Republican Party is to some degree in the position that it is vis-a-vis election interference and the stolen 2020 election. I just wonder, we're talking about who Trump's going to get to be his running mate. The Veep stakes has been a subject of much discussion this week. There's a new entrant to that race, Tom Cotton, the senator. And I just wonder, of the selection of people who have been, names bandied about, whether it's Doug Burgum, whether it's Tim Scott, whether it's Tom Cotton, whether it's Marco Rubio, are those the kind of people that are willing to lay their conscience at the door in the way that being Donald Trump's running mate would demand?
Gosh, Alex, I mean, you had a great line last week with it being a swimsuit competition, all the folks marching up to testify for, basically defend him in New York. But yeah, I mean, it seems so, right? And as shocking as that is, you take somebody like Marco Rubio or a couple of those others that you mentioned, right after January 6th, they went up there to the well of the Senate chamber, the House chamber, or, at a press conference, and they condemned what had happened on January 6th. Some of them even condemned or blamed Donald Trump for it. And here we are. Getting ready for the 2024 election after they had put the blame on him, after they had written him off, and now they're marching to his defense. They're all scurrying to try and figure out how they can get to #1 on his VP list. And politicians, when they do this, they do that because they think that there's a direct reward. For these guys, it's either the reward is that they're going to become, his vice presidential selection, and or that they're going to get to keep their position because they're so scared of what would happen to them politically if they angered his base, that they would get a primary challenge, and that primary challenge might be able to beat him, that they just think it's easier to give in and to show that fealty publicly. They have to do it so publicly and make sure that that base knows that, no, I was with Donald Trump, no matter what happens to him. That's where we're at. We're at this very weird, twisted echo chamber, all of Donald Trump's creation that has turned the Republican Party from a party that arguably, under Reagan, even though I didn't like the principles, actually stood for some principles, to now, as many people have pointed out, really more like a cult.
Yeah, well, can I ask you, Susan? I mean, you were talking about Nikki Haley earlier in the hour, and I just wonder what you think she's getting out of this, her endorsement of Donald Trump. She didn't say her supporters should and must follow him at the ballot box, but she said she was going to support Trump because Biden had been such a catastrophe. What does she actually get out of this?
Nikki Haley is one of the serial flip-floppers on Donald Trump in the Republican Party today. She's not the only one. But remember, she was against him, then she was for him, then she was against him again, then she was against him too early, so then she was sort of for him again, then she was against him, then she was even more against him, and now she's back to being for him. So it's pretty exhausting. She's relying on the template that has become the standard template this year. If people like Mitch McConnell, who literally has not spoken with Donald Trump since after the 2020 election, Mitch McConnell, who blamed Donald Trump for personally inciting the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, and yet is willing to say that he's endorsing and voting for him. Chris Sununu, the governor of New Hampshire, again, a scathing critic. I know for sure that Marco Rubio and Tom Cotton are under no illusions about Donald Trump. It's not like he's converted them to the religion of Donald Trump. And so it speaks much more to the incentive structure in the Republican Party today, per the secretary's observations, which I think is right on the mark. It's about ambition. It's about what the definition of what it means to be a Republican is. But for Donald Trump, we haven't talked about that much. I would just throw out there in this Veep stakes that Donald Trump believes that he was betrayed by Mike Pence on January 6th. It seems to me the one thing he's really looking for in a vice president is the most servile person without principles who will do whatever he says. That, in fact, is the criteria here. I don't think Donald Trump is looking for very much political help from a vice presidential candidate. He believes it's all about him in the end. And I just think loyalty is the thing we should be looking at.
Right. He's not looking to carry Arkansas. He's already got that one. He just needs the most spineless person among them. Susan Glasser, Brendan Buck, Julian Castro, thank you all for spending your Friday night with me. I really appreciate it.